Kafele graduated from Rutgers University School of Graduate Studies with an MA in Political Science with a specialization in United Nations and Global Policy Studies in 2025. And he was also inducted into the Rutgers University chapter of the Pi Sigma Alpha National Honors Society for Political Science. With that, without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Kafele.
Hello, good morning, everyone. How's everything going with you all? Excellent. First and foremost, I would like to thank Dr. Katie and also Ms. Sarah for curating and organizing this event, number one. Number two, I would like to thank you all at the American Nurses Enterprise and American Nurses Association for coming to this event virtually this morning. And also, number three, I would like to thank April Evans for giving a phenomenal presentation as well. So my presentation today is Juneteenth and the Legacy of Black America. And once again, I'm Baruti Libre Kafele, or B Libre Kafele. So we can move on
Baruti,
to the
just
next slide.
quickly. Oh, no,
Yes.
never mind. Never mind. There was something blocking the screen, but it's gone now.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And also, everyone, please share your questions, comments, or concerns towards the end of the presentation. And I'm going to do this very succinctly. I won't keep you all morning. Okay, so this is me right here. And as aforementioned, I have a Master's of Arts in Political Science from Rutgers University, magna cum laude graduate of Kean University, and I'm a multidisciplinary scholar and lecturer, but I'm still in the path of learning. I wrote the books Who Pays for Development, The Capital in the City. Now let's get to it. What is Juneteenth? April Evans eloquently explained what Juneteenth was. Juneteenth became a federal holiday in the United States in 2021, but as April eloquently explained earlier, emancipation did not bring economic equality. Formerly enslaved Black people were freed without land, compensation, or financial resources. The end of slavery represented legal freedom, but not economic freedom. And I'm going to get into that during the presentation, but I would like to read this quote. What good is having the right to sit at a lunch counter if you can't afford to buy a hamburger? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Juneteenth represents freedom, economic self-determination, resistance, community building, the unfinished struggle for economic justice, and historical memory. Now, Black economics after emancipation, late 19th century economic conditions, and also land ownership statistics. We're going to get into that. And power concedes nothing without a demand. Okay. In regards to Juneteenth, approximately 4 million formerly enslaved Africans or Black people were freed after the Civil War, and most Black Americans entered freedom without property, savings, or access to education. And as a matter of fact, according to the 1870 census, only 7% of Black folks owned land in the United States. And also in 1880, that number doubled into 14% of Blacks owning land in the United States compared to 55% of whites. And also, according to the metric that was utilized, that was based off of households. Even though there were various legislations that were passed as it pertains to land allocation and from the abandoned lands from the Civil War, still, a lot of Black folks couldn't afford to purchase land or even to own land for that matter, explaining a lot of the economic disparities. But in the midst of these disparities, there still was a lot of progress, specifically during the Reconstruction era of 1865 after Juneteenth, and also 2.5 years after the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation up until 1877. So I'm going to bring about a participatory approach as it pertains to this presentation. What is the significance of 1877? Just to ask you all. Let's see how I could go back here. What is the significance? Anyone? Going once, going twice.
In the chat, we've got end of Reconstruction.
Exactly. The end of Reconstruction. Something occurred called the Compromise of 1877. And the Compromise of 1877 was when Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican, defeated Samuel Tilden during the presidential election. Now, what happened was this. With Rutherford B. Hayes winning the election of 1877, that caused a lot of conflict, specifically in the South, because during that time, the Democratic Party of that time was not the same Democratic Party of today. You see, and as a matter of fact, in the midst of a lot of these problems, as a brief aside, we started to see a lot of Black politicians starting to ascend to victory of various elections. Like, for example, the first black representative was Hiram Revels of Mississippi, and also Louisiana had a black governor by the name of PBS Pinchback as an aside. So the late scholar by the name of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois designated those years as the mystic years. And also he wrote a book entitled Black Reconstruction as well, which you all can look into. So the Compromise of 1877, it led to a lot of protests. It led to a lot of rioting and a lot of problems in the South due to the election of Rutherford B. Hayes, who won the election against Samuel Tilden, where Tilden won the popular vote, but Hayes won the Electoral College. It's similar to a lot of the problems that we are seeing today as it pertains to presidential elections, but I will not get into them. But if you all are living in the world, then you all understand what I'm talking about. So due to a lot of the agitation that has occurred or that had occurred throughout the South, that's what led to the compromise. So the compromise of 1877 included these designations. One, the removal of federal troops from the South, which fortified and protected the newly freed African Americans in the South. You see, and also number two, the Southern cabinet position being open to a Southern Democrat. And in this case, it was David Key of the state of Tennessee, ironically, the same state where the Ku Klux Klan was formed around that same time. Number three, economic subsidies from the federal government going to the landowners of the South and also going to the entrepreneurs of the South so that they could build the Southern Transcontinental Railroad. And also, number four, state control of the South, because for those of you all who have studied history, the Civil War was based on state rights. Of course, you know, the fate of enslaved Africans and also other factors as it pertains to the Industrial Revolution as well, which I won't get into in detail due to time constraints. So in essence, the South wanted to pursue their own destiny with the help of the federal government instead of those funds getting allocated towards the protection, the fortification, and the advancement of a formerly enslaved population for that matter. So that was what 1877 was about, and that played a catalytic effect leading to 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson, and also the institutionalization and the formation of Jim Crow in the South, in which you had segregated institutions, in essence, benefiting the mainstream society at the expense of the newly freed Africans, newly quote unquote freed Africans for that matter. So Mr. April Evans eloquently explained the sharecropping situation. So sharecropping, in essence, replaced chattel slavery in the South, and also not to mention a lot of the antecedents of African Americans in this country came from sharecropping traditions, just like slavery conditions. Like my great grandmother was a sharecropper as well, from Virginia, I believe, and then she migrated up into New Jersey, and she worked as a nurse, which is relevant towards this presentation, and then eventually bought an 8-bedroom house in East Orange, New Jersey. So she lived in New York, according to my understanding of the story, and then migrated to New Jersey as well. And also with sharecropping, that increased the output of cotton by 80% by 1910. You all could look into that as well. So the promise of 40 acres and a mule was largely never fulfilled because a lot of acres from the Civil War, 400,000 acres, was supposed to be allocated to a lot of the freed people, 40,000 of the freed people, but unfortunately that didn't work. That's where you hear the term 40 acres and a mule, and that's where you hear about the Homestead Act as well, and also the various other legislations which catalyzed to HBCUs, black banks, the Freedmen's Bureau, and the various other institutions which were created for the advancement of black people after the traumatic incidences of the institution of slavery. So sharecropping often trapped black families into cycles of debt and dependency. So by 1910, black Americans owned approximately 15 to 16 million acres of farmland in the United States, and black farmers represented a significant portion of the agricultural labor force in the South, but did not own a great portion of the land in the South. So black communities developed banks, schools, churches, insurance companies, newspapers, and mutual aid societies, and not to mention black-owned institutions. So by the late 1800s to the turn of the century, going into the 20th century, black Americans established thousands of businesses despite segregation. Black banks emerged to provide loans and financial services denied by white institutions. Historically, black colleges and universities helped produce teachers, lawyers, doctors, and entrepreneurs. So even in the midst of the disenfranchisement, the disparities, the problems, the domestic terrorism that was occurring by these various hate groups, we still saw black advancement occur. And also we did see a rise in literacy from one generation. So that is something that is laudable and commendable as it pertains to the black struggle and the legacy of Juneteenth. Important black economic leaders, post-emancipation, Booker T. Washington, Robert Church, who was very influential and also played a very pivotal role in the economic development of Memphis and also the surrounding parts of Tennessee, specifically in the real estate sector. Madam C.J. Walker, one of the first female millionaires with hair care products and cosmetological geniuses. And also W.E.B. Du Bois, arguably the most notable scholar of the 20th century, no matter the racial lines, who wrote the book, The Philadelphia Negro, Black Reconstruction, The Soul of Black Folks, various books. You all could look into Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, and also he received his PhD from Harvard University, and he basically said that Harvard was in essence privileged, not using those words, but Harvard was in essence privileged to have him even study there and to get his PhD from there. And also Maggie Leonard Walker, who also played a role in the banking industry as well. So at the bottom of education, at the bottom of politics, even at the bottom of religion itself, there must be for our race economic foundations or economic independence by Booker T. Washington. He's the one that coined this quote, and also a great book that you could read by him is Up from Slavery. So Black Wall Street and Black economic self-sufficiency. Founded in the early 1900s, you had the Greenwood District in North Tulsa, Oklahoma, designated as Black Wall Street, in which you had 35 city blocks where there were black-owned hotels, restaurants, banks, theaters, grocery stores, schools, law offices, medical practices, newspapers, and transportation systems. So you had a self-sufficient black community in the Northern District of Tulsa, Oklahoma, designated as Black Wall Street. But not to mention, there were various self-sufficient black communities during that time, whether we were to talk about Durham, North Carolina, Rosewood, Florida, if we were to talk about Harlem, New York, various Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, there were various self-sufficient black communities, but it's just that the most notable one that we know about in history is the one in Tulsa. And the reason being was because of the Tulsa race massacre in 1921, Memorial Day weekend of 1921, from May 31st all the way up until June 1st. Now, Greenwood had 10,000 black residents, and that caused a lot of conflict from the people and a lot of resentment from the people of the southern part of Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was predominantly white. So you had a lot of vigilante groups, a lot of hatred going on towards the economically self-sufficient black community in Tulsa, and that led to the race riot, in which there were a lot of casualties, there were a lot of displacements, businesses were destroyed, generational wealth was destroyed in this community, where the black dollar circulated between 19 to 36 times within that said community, in which they practiced the tradition of Ujamaa, which is a key Swahili term, which is a language spoken in Africa, East Africa, specifically in Kenya, Uganda, and parts of the Congo. Cooperative economics, that's what it means if you were to directly translate it into English. All right, so going back to the race riot, May 31st all the way up until June 1st of 1921, white mobs attacked Greenwood. Up to 300 black residents were unfortunately killed. More than 1,000 homes were destroyed, and roughly 35 city blocks were burned, and thousands of black residents were displaced. Economists and historians argue that the generational wealth of the black people of Tulsa was in essence destroyed. And as a matter of fact, in 2016, I visited Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was visiting a friend who eventually received his master's degree over at the university there. And I told him, I said, look, let's go to the Greenwood District of Tulsa, Oklahoma. He didn't understand the significance of it, honestly. But the thing about it, I said, look, whether you want to go or not, I'm going regardless. So he followed me there. And we went to Tulsa, north of Tulsa, specifically the Greenwood District. And a lot of it is still dilapidated to this day. And we're talking about close to 100 years later. That's another discussion. I'll continue. So the destruction of Greenwood demonstrates how racial violence interrupted black wealth accumulation and economic independence. So we spoke about Madam C.J. Walker, widely recognized as one of the first self-made female millionaires in America, built a black hair empire, employed thousands of black women. Maggie Lena Walker became the first black woman in America to charter and lead a bank, advocated black financial independence. Now, there were still structural barriers as it pertains to black wealth, like segregation and redlining. Federal housing policies in the 20th century often excluded black families from mortgages. Redlining denied black neighborhoods access to investment and credit, and black veterans frequently face discrimination in access to GI Bill housing benefits. Now, as it pertains to the federal housing policies, we saw the Interstate Highway Act in 1956, in which during that time, that was when a lot of the veterans returned back to the United States after World War II. So a lot of them received the benefits of the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, which is designated as the GI Bill. And the GI Bill, in essence, subsidized a lot of these veterans with the opportunity in order to purchase homes with the VA, with the help of the VA. So in essence, a lot of the veterans were able to purchase properties with zero down payments, for that matter, due to the GI Bill. But unfortunately, a lot of black veterans were excluded from a lot of these bills, which in essence compromised and destroyed the opportunity for generational wealth, which were in essence given to a lot of the mainstream society or the majority of the population, but not to the people of color. And the Interstate Highway Act of 1956, in essence, created highways throughout the United States to make it efficient for a lot of Americans to travel, since we started to see the rise of the automobile industry. And with the rise of the automobile industry, that was in juxtaposition with the rise of the fast food industry and also the rise of the hotel industry, which was very beneficial, and also the rise of the suburbanization of society as well. That's where we hear about real estate developers like William Levitt, who built like 10,000 homes in places like New York, in places like New Jersey, in places like Puerto Rico, and throughout the country for that matter, but mainly for the mainstream society or the Caucasian population, excluding black folks. So with the Interstate Highway Act in 1956, we started to see a lot of these highways destroy black communities where there were black-owned businesses, black-owned homes, and also black-owned infrastructure, and also displacing a lot of black folks to the point in which they had to resort to living in projects, thanks to the National or the Federal Housing Act of 1935 or 1936, where we started to see the rise of public housing. So in essence, we traded black homes and also black-owned businesses for public housing. And we see the manifestations of that to this day. And I'll continue. Land loss statistics. Black Americans owned approximately 15 to 16 million acres of farmland in 1910, but by the late 1990s, roughly 90% of black-owned farmland had been lost. Between 1920 and 1997, black farmers lost more than 12 million acres of land. So these are some of the structural barriers right there. But like I said, due to time, I'm just going to keep things succinct. Black buying power in the modern black economy. Black American purchasing power has exceeded $1.7 trillion in recent years, according to Nielsen and other market research organizations. So according to some, especially the late great Dr. Jawaza Kunjufu, who wrote the book on Black Economics, meaning that if we retained a large percentage of a lot of our purchasing power, then that would equalize to the GDP and the GNP of a lot of nation states. Like Black America would be considered rank 8 as it pertains, ranked between 8 and 16 as it pertains to one of the wealthiest nations in the world. But the thing about it is that Black America, even though Black America is an ethnicity, Black America is not a nation state, because in order to be a nation state, you need land, you need a government, you need to control the means of production, etc. Now, I'm going to move forward. Important facts. Black Americans contributed heavily to the U.S. labor force and consumer economy. Black culture drives substantial portions of global entertainment and popular culture. Black-owned businesses continue to grow despite unequal access to capital. GDP comparisons, I just spoke about that. Now, wealth statistics. All right. Federal Reserve distribution of household wealth in the U.S. since 1989. White households held 83.5% of the nation's wealth as of the fourth quarter of 2025, according to Federal Reserve statistics. Black households held 3.3% of the nation's wealth as of the fourth quarter of 2025, and Hispanic households held 2.4% of the nation's wealth as of the fourth quarter of 2025, meaning that a lot of the disparities going back to 1865, around the time of Juneteenth, still exist to this day if we were to look at the numbers. You see, these are the facts right here. Now, home ownership by race and ethnicity of the householder as of 2020. The source, census.gov. Whites alone consist of 73.1% of homeowners in the United States. Blacks or African Americans consist of 7.9% of homeowners in the United States. Hispanics consist of 10.5% of homeowners in the United States, and Asians consist of 4.7% of homeowners in the United States. Black and minority home ownership rates remain substantially low, while white home ownership rates continue to rise. Now let's get into student loans, which is something that's very relevant to a lot of us. White and Caucasians, 59% of Caucasians, who have obtained associate degrees, are in student loan debt. You see, while 39% of whites have student loan debt for their bachelor's degree. As it pertains to African Americans, 81% of associate degree holders who are in the African American community are in debt with student loans. And within the Black community, as it pertains to bachelor degree holders, 59%. And then we can move to the Latino or the Latinx community, 60% of associate degree students, are in student loan debt, and also 31% as it pertains to bachelor degree holders. And with the Asian community, it's 39%. And then it's 22% for bachelor degree holders. And then within the Native American, the Indigenous, or the Alaskan community, 65% of associate degree holders are in student loan debt, 65% of their community. And as it pertains to the bachelor's degrees, it's, according to the statistics, 385. So there isn't a percentage, it's just 385. Okay, so we can move on. Now, the recommended verifiable sources for a lot of these statistics, you can go to government and institutional sources, the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, U.S. Census Bureau, Brookings Institute, USDA Historical Black Land Ownership Data, History.com articles, etc. And in the meantime, this is my presentation. For any questions, comments, or concerns, I am here. And I wasn't able to see the screen because my PowerPoint took up the entire screen. So if you all have any questions, please notify me now. And I hope that you all learned from this presentation. Thank you for you all's time.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Baruti. That was
Thank you.
quite illuminating. There's a lot of information there that I hadn't seen before. If you could stop sharing too,
Yes,
because I don't like seeing my face on my screens.
understandable.
But there was a lot of chatter in the chat, and there was a lot of resources that was being shared. So I'll give you time to look through that while we wait for folks to ask questions. And I see my friend Brian Pinder has a question.
Yes, excellent.
Yes,
Excellent.
good morning. I just wanted to come on here and say thank you to you because you
Thank you.
actually I consider myself to be a scholar of Black history and African American history in the United States. And one of the things that was so interesting in your presentation was I had never even heard of PBS Pinchback. And then when I started looking them up, researching them while you were talking, and that was such a cool thing to learn about. He and I actually share a similar lineage story.
Respectable, brother.
Him being the product of a slave owner having children with one of his slaves, which is very interesting. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Appreciate you a whole lot. And may you continue to excel in your endeavors as well.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? And for folks that put resources in the chat, feel free to come off mute and speak about what you put in the chat as well.
And I would like to interject with one thing. Pardon me. This is very quick. As it pertains to the Native American population, as it pertains to the student loans, it's 38%. I said 385 is 38%. There was just a brief discrepancy as it pertains to the typo. So I just wanted to say that. All right. Now you all could continue. Pardon me.
Thank you. That's all right. I think someone was going to say something.
Yes.
Sean, go ahead.
I want to first of all say, Baruti, thank you. Amazing presentation and very powerful. One thing I never understood, when I was in the military for over 24 years, and when we raise our right hand and say, we support the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic.
Right.
It's interesting because and growing up as a child, like you learn about the Alamo, and they say never forget the Alamo, and then if you live through September 11th, they say never forget. But I didn't learn about the Tulsa Massacre until I was at Kent State. And It wasn't even part of Kent State's overall curriculum.